Simply lovely. That is almost certainly how Max Verstappen is describing the Japanese Grand Prix weekend. Welcome to this video. I'm going to be talking about some of the key stories out of Suzuka as we look forward to the next two events in a triple header for F1 2025. And for a moment there, it did really feel like Super Max was back again, because McLaren had the top times in all of the free practice sessions. In fact, they were right up at the top during qualifying as well until Q3. Max Verstappen got pole position, but he didn't get any fastest sector time. I think sector 1 went to Lando Norris, and then 2 and 3 to Oscar Piastri on his final lap. But a mistake in sector 1 for Oscar Piastri ended up costing him the chance at pole position. He ended up starting in, third place. Lando Norris was second. And this is the thing, is it looks almost a bit dull when you compare the grid position to the final race result, but in reality, there were some interesting elements to the race. For example, the conditions were less than optimal. Drivers had to manage getting through puddles on the front stretch on a newly resurfaced part of Suzuka. Half the track's been resurfaced in the off-season. I think the other half is getting done this year instead. And yeah, the rain coming down, which was somewhat beneficial to racing fans who didn't want to see the grass continuing to catch fire. It meant that the crossfade over between different tyre compounds was partially to do with how tyre wear was going, but partially to do with track conditions as well. But the reason why it might be seen a bit dull is because of actually quite a lack of change in position from qualifying to the race. Now, Suzuka is a tricky place to overtake, made more tricky by the fact that there is only one DRS zone, and that's down the front straight away. But if you look at it, you'll see that the only position change in the top 10 between qualifying and the race was Lewis Hamilton and Isaac Hadjar, which was a change that happened relatively early in the race as well. Elsewhere, after that, Alonso climbed up to 11th place and Yuki Tsunoda up to 12th place on his Red Bull debut. Tsunoda qualifying behind Liam Lawson and getting knocked out in Q2 in his first weekend in the Red Bull. But after that, 13th was Gasly, who had qualified 11th. 14th was Sainz, who qualified in 12th. And then Doohan climbed up from 19th on the grid to 15th in the race. He was then followed by Hülkenberg, who himself was then followed by Lawson, who dropped down, then Ocon and Bortoletto. At 20th place was the driver who was last on the grid. It was Lance Stroll. So there were some changes around in the lower places, but there was very little change at the top. Did that make for it being a boring race? I'm not so sure. Did I accidentally fall asleep for part of it? Yes, I did again. But hopefully I won't have to for the next couple, because they're not so fly away. What this does do, though, now that we are actually 1/8 of the way through the season, and that's in terms of including sprint races as well, it gives us a nice sample size when it comes to looking at the championship picture. Lando Norris leads Max Verstappen by a single point, testament to how good Verstappen is with that car, because we know that the Red Bull isn't the fastest car out there. But it tells you how good a driver the four-time champion is, who is going for his 5th. Oscar Piastri is 12 points out now, and the main thing that's hampering him is still that 9th place in his home race. George Russell is in 4th place, his podium streak coming to an end in Grand Prix this year. But he has the same amount of points as you would if you P3 in every race if we didn't have sprints. Andrea Kimi Antonelli still holds on to 5th place in the standings. Obviously benefited by the fact that Ferrari's got double disqualified last time out, but he's still 10 points clear of Charles Leclerc, who's in 6th, whilst Alex Albon in 7th is still 3 points ahead of Sir Lewis Hamilton. The top 10 is rounded up by a tie on 10 points for Esteban Ocon with his 5th place in China, and Lance Stroll, whose best finish was a 6th in Australia. There are a few more drivers that have scored points, 5 more in fact, but there are also still 5 who haven't, including Pierre Gasly, Fernando Alonso, and then the other Alpine of Jack Doohan, as well as the struggling Liam Lawson, who's just switched back car, and Gabriel Bortoleto, who's a rookie. Meanwhile, in the manufacturers, McLaren hold a relatively good advantage still. And that is because, well, there hasn't been a point score, has there, for that second Red Bull still. So Max Verstappen has 61 points, and Red Bull subsequently also ends up picking up those 61 points. But McLaren is on 111. It's a maximum whole race weekend clear. I believe Mercedes is still going to be second in the constructors after all of this. But I mean, it's not particularly pronounced. They're not noticeably clear of Red Bull now. But it does mean that Red Bull hold on to 3rd in the championship standings. Whilst I believe Ferrari will end up jumping Williams and get back into 4th place in the standings. Anyway, those are my thoughts and feelings about the event. Let me know yours in the comments section down below. If anything happens to change the results, like a disqualification that we saw in China, I'll update you through YouTube short. But until next time, it's bye for now.